name is Jason JROCK Houston, and you're listening to Chaotic Riffs Magazine. We can be found on the web at www.chaoticriffs.com. And this is for our new On for Record segment. We're speaking with lead singer Mick Adams from the LA-based Rolling Stones tribute band, Mick Adams and the Stones. Welcome to the show today, Mick. And of course, we're going to be talking about Edgar Winter's 1971 White Trash album. You, like a lot of people I've seen, have been making you made like a top 10 or top 20 list of some of your all-time favorite albums. And
oh yeah, I got to go back and still do more.
yeah, and you got a lot of interesting influences when it comes to that. I was looking at it, and most people might expect us, since you played a Rolling Stones tribute, you'll be talking to him about Rolling Stones music. But I seen Edgar Winter on your list, and I thought that would be interesting to talk about for several reasons. Just to give you a little history on myself, I knew of Edgar Winter, of course, because of songs like Free Ride and Frankenstein. That was kind of my introduction. Those are kind of the two songs I've heard the most on the radio. And Free Ride, I mean, that's a classic rock song, you just can't go wrong with. But I'll tell you, in preparation for this, I seen you list Edgar Winter's White Trash album. I'd heard a few songs before, but I really wasn't familiar with it. I got to thank you, Mick, for turning me on to the album, because in doing so, I went to Amazon and I ordered it, and I fell in love with this stuff. I thought, wow, there's more to this Edgar Winter than just, Free Ride. And I mean, what's interesting about Edgar Winter, especially this White Trash album, if you put it on, okay, this is like for anybody who doesn't know who Edgar Winter is, white albino guy from Texas. And it's interesting, and I bring it up only because you put this on from start to finish. It's a combination of everything from Texas blues, rhythm and blues, jazz, rock, funky music, and everything in between. And I mean, this guy got soul.
And a lot of gospel.
Yeah. I did hear elements of that even, which kind of really impressed me, to say the least.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk about, how did you get turned on to Edgar Winter, or how did this album specifically first come on your radar?
I got turned on to Johnny Winter first.
Of course, yeah. Older brother.
I love blues stuff.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing, and then I found out he had a brother who was a great musician. So I hunted up the first Edgar Winter album, a solo album. It's called Winter's Dream.
Okay.
It was really different, really bluesy, jazzy.
Yeah.
A little rockish. It was like really something different.
A little bit of everything, yeah.
Yeah. So then I heard he hooked up with Rick Derringer.
Yeah.
From McCoy's, who produced the album.
Yeah, he produced a lot of Edgar Winter stuff, but he's a key.
Oh yeah, he did, and they became good friends.
Yeah.
And so I heard he and Edgar hooked up, and they were putting this band together. And then next thing I know, there's an Edgar Winter The White Trash album out.
Yeah.
So I couldn't wait to go to the store and grab it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm sorry.
It's one of those. Yeah. It's one of my albums. There's certain albums I consider like Americana.
Yeah.
Okay, that's Edgar Winter's White Trash album, the first Blood, Sweat, and Tears album with Al Cooper.
Yeah.
Okay, check that one out too. It's really unique.
Okay.
And another one that's very Americana, The Electric Flag, with Michael Bloomfield and Buddy Miles, who played with Jimi Hendrix later.
Oh wow, yeah.
I mean, all those songs have all the elements of what's made, I guess, American rock.
Yeah. I mean, this Edgar Winter's White Trash. Like you brought up Rick Derringer, would go on to have a pretty successful solo artist, in his own right, and a guitar hero. But
sure.
He produced a lot of these Edgar Winter albums, and so and he played on them. He's a big part of Edgar Winter's sound. Yeah,
the thing that also fascinated me about the album was, from start to finish, I mean, like I said, there's gospel.
Yeah.
Like you said, there's jazz, there's blues, there's Texas blues.
Yeah.
There's just really interesting songs, and they're interestingly put together. I mean, you listen to the arrangements, like on I Got News for You.
Yeah.
Okay? I call that horn section. You ready for this?
Yeah.
Swamp horns.
Oh wow, yeah, I could see that.
Because a lot of these guys came out of Arkansas and Louisiana. These horn players were with them at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now, man, it's just a different vibe.
Yeah, it really is, especially when you see what Edgar Winter went on to become. It's kind of interesting that this preceded all that other stuff. But yeah, like I love the first track. Give it everything you got. I mean, that's a great way to kick off the album. It's kind of just like a great battle cry, if you will. Hey, Edgar, give it all you got. And I mean, it's just a great way to kick it off.
And especially that first scream he does.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I mean, almost gospel, like you said. I mean, it's like the preacher's talking to you. I mean, it's that good. And
oh yeah.
And then of course you got the single, which I really love. Keep playing that rock and roll. And I go between that one and Good Morning Music. I mean, again,
those are both great songs. Well, Rick Derringer plays on both those songs. So
yeah, and the other thing about it is the other singer on here, I guess, is some guy named Jerry LaCroix. And I didn't know too much about him, but what I could find is after he worked with Edgar Winter, he went on to do a lot of other things, but probably what he was most known for was working with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, who you also mentioned.
Yeah, he was with them for just a short period of time, and then David Clayton Thomas came in.
Yeah. And, but this is really, this is quite an album. And what I will say, it is, it's all killer and no filler, if you know what I mean. And
definitely.
I think what makes it such a great album is Edgar Winter is, he like a multi-instrument. I mean, he plays he makes it cool to play the sax. You know what I mean? Sax player, keyboard player, and I was reading he even invented. I don't know if you've ever seen any of his music videos or seen him perform on stage, but a lot of times he'll play the keyboards on stage, and it's kind of like almost a guitar strap type thing. And apparently, he invented that.
He came up with that idea. That's a fact.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it's just very interesting. And like I said, this album it just really speaks to you, from top to bottom. You really can't go wrong. And another one I kind of dig was, You Were My Light, and Let's Get It On, Where Would I Be? Just great tunes.
Yeah. Every song on there is really great. At the end of Save Our Planet.
Yeah.
It's all that gospel stuff, and it goes into like a halftime feel towards the end.
Yeah.
I saw them live at the Greek Theater out here.
Oh, wow.
At Winter White Trash. And they did, I guess, the whole album, basically.
Yeah.
But when they did that song, Edgar and Jerry, they both have that gritty scream that they do.
Yeah.
Jerry's is lower and Edgar's is higher. Well, at the end of that, they did that whole scream thing at the very end in harmony.
And especially on this album, Edgar Winter, he's kind of like obviously the main guy, but if you look at any of his other albums too, he was one of these guys that was very much like what Alice Cooper does. Brilliant guy in that he surrounds himself by other musicians that are just as equally talented as he is,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's why, like you say, he's worked with Rick Derringer. He, Ronnie Montrose. I was surprised because of course I know Ronnie Montrose from the band Montrose, but to learn that it was Ronnie Montrose that was playing on Free Ride and all that stuff.
Edgar's just such an icon to me because he's so multi-talented, and I mean, this is his first real rock album. His first album, Winter's Dream, was a lot more jazzy and bluesy. But this album rocks, man, from start to finish rocks.
Yeah, and
what's really crazy is in the middle of this album, there's a song called "Dying to Live."
Oh yes, I've seen that.
And it's like a swan song. It's like, what are you doing, dude? It's your first rock album. Come on! But the lyrics are so good. Oh my God.
Yeah, but again, that's kind of my point. Especially the fact this guy is a multi-instrumentalist. He makes it cool to play the saxophone. Because again, like you're saying, when you play the sax, or you think of like jazz and stuff. And that's the thing about Edgar Winter, especially on this album, is there's a little something on there for everybody. And he's not one of these guys that like is afraid to. Oh no, we can't do that. Like if he wants to try it, let's give it a shot. Let's put it on there.
Sure. The whole thing about music from back in the day like this is they were experimenting. Mm-hmm. They weren't afraid to push the envelope. The Beatles opened that door. They were doing all kinds of weird crap that no one had done before. Like miking string sections right by where the bow draws across. And using horns that were a little more distorted. And they kind of opened that door. But all the bands back then, for lack of a better expression, had creativity.
Oh,
You know, they're very creative and pushing the envelope, and it was just really a fun time to grow up listening to music. Oh my God!
Yeah, and after listening to this White Trash album, the other thing is, I was doing some more research and I seen, they had two albums. They had this one and then they had another one called Roadwork, which was pretty much a live album. And I'm kind of surprised to see that the White Trash band only lasted for 2 albums.
Well, there were a lot of things that came into it. I think the drummer Bobby Ramirez OD'd.
Oh wow!
And that put a real dent in things.
Yeah.
And then Edgar got a little sick for a while. Also, neither he or his brother were actually real healthy people.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I met him and got his autograph and stuff, he literally had to get within about 4 inches of where he was signing his name so he could actually kind of see what he was doing. It's
Yeah.
he's actually legally blind.
Yeah. Wow. I had no idea that. I mean, I know he was like suffering from albinism, which I actually when I was growing up, I knew a kid that was like that, and he could see, but he was too like legally blind. He could see just enough to get around, and if he went in the sun or anything, I mean, he'd get really sick. So it's just kind of. But what's amazing, knowing that little bit about how he had to suffer those health issues, it never really deteriorated. I mean, he's had a pretty successful career. I mean, I went on the Wikipedia, and I forget what the exact number is, but he's doing all right, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, he's just a warrior, man. He's just a talented warrior.
Yeah, and he's
so good.
And that's why, like I said, it's kind of interesting to see where he started with this White Trash album, and in 1972, a year later, they put out the Only They Come Out at Night, and it's such diverse stuff. I mean, I'd say obviously Only They Come Out at Night's a lot more of a rock sound, a lot more commercial.
Sure. Well, the record company probably told him, you got one more chance of a hugely commercial successful album, or we're dropping you. That's what went on back then.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's what happened to him or not.
Yeah.
But that album was definitely a real shift of gears as to where he was actually coming from.
Yeah.
But it probably pretty much set him up for the rest of his life.
It really did, because I mean, even those 2 songs, Frankenstein and Free Ride, everybody knows those. I mean, it's on classic radio. You hear it all. They have them in.
Sure.
They have them in
those songs.
They have them in movies. They have them on commercials. I mean, that's where this guy made a lot of his money. And even up to a few years ago, he was still doing a lot of touring and stuff. And it's kind of sad. Like when I'm listening to this White Trash album, I wasn't as familiar with all the songs on here as I was the other album. Only They Come Out at Night, obviously, because those are kind of a hit. But it makes you kind of wonder why did this other stuff get played on the radio? I guess maybe just because a lot of it didn't have that pop element, I guess.
Well, no, it did back in the day.
Yeah.
Because back in the day, KPPC radio out here in California would broadcast out of a Methodist church basement over in Pasadena. And then, some of the other stations that kind of came along after that, I mean, they would play whole albums.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, back in the day they did that.
Or they'd play like 3 or 4 cuts from it out and say, man, you got to check this out, And so bands could still make money, by going on the road and supporting the albums and stuff like that. Now there's no albums to support, so they just have to be road dogs all the time.
I mean, people forget back then, bands would they would put out new releases, new music for the sole purpose of being able to go on the road, where it's done a little differently these days, where a lot of bands, because CDs or whatever aren't selling, they don't even, they just kind of live on the catalog of music, and, we're just going to live off of, live shows and that, and that's the way a lot of the bands these days are making the money,
Sure,
Yeah.
but that's the only way they can.
And then, another interesting thing about Edgar Winter, too, is, I don't know if it has anything to do with the way the guy looks. And the reason I bring that up is because back in the 70s, at this time, people used to, remember, they didn't have the internet back then. So a lot of times you'd pick up, like, Circus Magazine or something like that, and you'd see the advertisement for the album, and okay, that's when it's going to be released. That's what the album cover, looks like. And like you said, a lot of the more popular artists played on the radio, obviously. But and back then they didn't have CDs either. They had vinyl, they had cassettes, and even 8-tracks, if you remember.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then now a lot of times too, these bands would go on the road, obviously, and like we said, that's how they make their living. And before they even really had music videos, a lot of times they'd go on the roads and they'd make like a live promo, and they'd put that out kind of as a music video back at the time, and that's how they'd sell a lot of this stuff. And so obviously I'm going to because you're playing the Rolling Stones tribute, I'm going to give you a little bit of a trivia thing here and see if you know. Do you know what member of the Edgar Winter group would go on to record a Rolling Stones cover?
Did what? I'm sorry.
Do you know which member of the Edgar Winter group went on to record a cover of a Rolling Stones song?
No, I don't.
Okay, you might be surprised to know this. Ronnie Montrose on the second Montrose album, which is called Paper Money. It's the last album with Sammy Hagar. They do a great cover of the song Connection with Ronnie on lead vocals. And I actually went on YouTube to compare the Montrose version to the Rolling Stone version, and they sound like two completely different songs. If you haven't checked that out, I really suggest you do that.
I'm sure it probably is, yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, and again, it's interesting because on that Only Come Out at Night album, Ronnie Montrose was also a big part of that album, and it surprises me that he only lasted for one album, but obviously wanted to go on and form his own band. But then after that, Rick Derringer, he came in for a lot of the stuff after that.
Yeah. They've been friends for a long time. Those two guys.
And Rick Derringer, he's also very much like Edgar Winter, underrated. I mean, he's had a successful career. Don't get me wrong, but
oh yeah, he's always been underrated. I agree with you. Sure.
But like as a guitar hero, people know the name. Like when you hear Rick Derringer, a lot of times you do think of either Edgar Winter or even the song Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo. But he's done a lot more than that,
Oh yeah, well you can go all the way back to him with what's the name of the band he's in way back west? Hang on Snoopy. That was him playing guitar on that.
Oh wow.
McCoys.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he was part of the McCoys back in the '60s.
And so I got to ask you, Mick, did you ever get the chance to see Edgar Winter live?
Oh yeah.
And talk a little bit.
I saw him live. I saw this is an interesting lineup. Ready?
Uh-huh.
And actually, one of my favorite concerts I ever saw.
Wow.
I saw. There were actually 4 bands on the bill. It was like an all-day affair at the Greek Theater.
Okay.
It was Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Okay, wow.
Edgar Winter Group.
Okay.
Edgar Winter White Trash.
Oh, wow.
That's what I was really dying to see. Humble Pie.
Humble Pie, that must have been a great show, Steve Marriott.
and the headliner, believe it or not, was Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Oh, wow.
That's really bizarre.
Yeah, but see, back in the 70s, they would do stuff like that. You'd have like, ZZ Top and Aerosmith and maybe Cream on the same bill. It was just crazy, but that's how they did it,
This is really, you want to hear really crazy? I was in high school.
Uh-huh.
There's a place called the Rose Palace in Pasadena. They started having concerts.
Okay.
And so one of the first concerts I ever went to, I went to see Deep Purple.
Oh, wow.
So, but here was the lineup. The opening, there were 3 bands. The opening act was a brand new band out of Europe, out of England, called Jethro Tull.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Okay, so they were the opener.
Yeah.
The band that was in the middle slot, so to speak, was a band who was getting huge success in England and huge success here with their first album.
Yeah.
That was Led Zeppelin.
Oh, wow.
It was their first U.S. tour. And then headlining was Deep Purple, and with Ian Gillan still on vocals.
Oh, wow.
What a freaking concert that was. And the crazy part of it was, I saw all that. You're going to die when I tell you.
What?
I saw all that for $4.50.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow, man. That was back in the day. Yeah.
I was like a sophomore or junior in high school, maybe.
Wow.
It was like $4.50. I saw those 3 bands together. Holy crap!
Yeah, and of those bands you mentioned, Jethro Tull, I'm not a huge fan of what they do. I mean, like anybody, I got appreciation for what they do, but the sad thing is, people, from what I understand, people that are into Jethro Tull, like they're real diehards of that band, and then there are people that aren't. Like when they hear the name Jethro Tull, 2 things come to mind. That they back in like 1986 or 87, whatever it was, they were nominated Best Heavy Metal Band, and it's like how do you go? How did you get to that? And then a lot of people realize, okay, Jethro Tull, that's the band where the guy plays the flute or whatever. But and that's kind of sad because they've been around all these years, and the people that are, Jethro Tull fans, they're real diehards from what I understand. But again, at the same time, being around all these years and probably can't even name a song, that's kind of just very sad. But they've had success, obviously. Otherwise, they wouldn't still be doing it.
Sure.
Yeah.
What's crazy is if compared to where they ended up, if you go back to their the early beginnings, I think the album was called This Was Jethro Tull or something like that. That was Jethro Tull, something like that. It's an early Jethro Tull album.
Oh wow!
It's totally different.
And
it's a cross between blues, jazz, and kind of like English folk music.
Yeah, and
it's fascinating. Wow. It's a great album.
Yeah, and see, I think the reason they're not more popular, weren't bigger maybe here in the States, is because they, like you're saying, very much with Edgar Winter, they were not afraid to do whatever they wanted. They like, this is what we sound like, this is what we want to do, this is what we're putting out. Now you mentioned like Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin.
Sure.
I love both bands. I have appreciation for what Led Zeppelin does, but I lean more towards like Deep Purple just for the fact that it's a little more harder edge. And then what I dig about Deep Purple is I point to Deep Purple when people tell me that keyboards don't belong in rock music, keyboards suck. I'm like, you look at what John Lord did with the keyboard, and back in the day, you'd go see, especially the original lineup, you go see them play in concert. It was nothing like being at home in your room listening to the record. I mean, they would jam on one song for 30 minutes live in concert, and then you never knew what Richie Blackmore was going to do on stage.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying.
Yeah,
things were just so different back then. The bands experimented; they were allowed to experiment. Crazy stories like Peter Frampton doing 2-3 albums, and they're getting ready to dump him.
Yeah.
The label's getting ready to dump him, and they send him out on tour. And he says, "No, why don't we record the tour just for the hell of it?" And it turns out to be one of the largest selling albums of history of music. Come on.
Probably the best selling album of his career. And what is very sad about that at the same time, as huge as that one album was, and he toured behind it for several years. But after the touring stopped, his career went down for several years, and it was only when David Bowie invited him to go on tour with him as part of his band did Frampton's career go back up. Thank you, Mr. Bowie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then
he's another one of my favorites, but we won't go there today.
yeah, and we could stay talking about Edgar Winter and comparing Edgar Winter to kind of thing I dig about him very much, like I was saying, Deep Purple is this guy is a multi-instrumentalist, but any of these songs, like you listen to something, not just like Free Ride, but you listen to something like Keep Playing That Rock and Roll, Good Morning Music. That he makes the keyboards in the rock music. It's just good time music. That's what it is. It comes alive. That's the main part. Like the keyboard, the piano playing in that. That's the main part of that song. And just any of the notes he's playing, it just gets you off.
He's pretty amazing. If you go back, if you like going back and checking out stuff that you never really paid much attention to or got into at the time.
Yeah.
Seriously, the other 2 albums I mentioned, the very first Blood, Sweat, and Tears album, I think it's called A Child is Father to Man. Okay,
yeah, I'll have to do that. And
that's a great album full of jazz and rock and blues, real Americana stuff. And then the Electric Flag, oh my God, that's just like, they came out of San Francisco. I was after Bloomfield, came out here to the West Coast. That man's like just scary good. Oh wow. My God.
Wow. And getting back to Edgar Winter, another one of his albums that I got to kind of turn people onto, that I just kind of turned myself onto was, when I seen this album on your list, I gone on YouTube listening to everything they had on Edgar Winter, and just to kind of educate myself, because I knew the one album they only come out at night. That's I'm constantly listening to that stuff, but I want to educate myself. And then he has this other album, Shock Treatment, very very much kind of rocks, much more of a rock sound, and I think that's another cool album that he did.
Which one was that?
Shock Treatment.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course.
And then
that was still in that commercial,
pop
pre-commercial stage, so to speak, before he realized if he didn't make the label a lot of money pretty soon, he was going to get dumped from the label probably. That's just how they worked back then.
Yeah.
You know.
I guess lucky for him. Though, that a lot of what he's living off these days is those royalties off those early albums. And the one thing I will say about the record companies back then is they were much better than they are today. Like a lot of times these days, a lot of bands don't even have a record label. It's like what is a record label with a lot of these major labels? Or if you get signed to a major label these days, and it's like the debut album doesn't sell a million plus, we're going to dump you right away.
Oh yeah. Of course, there was no grace period for learning what it's like to be in the studio and trying to be creative in the studio. The studio was a whole different animal than playing live.
Yeah.
And back then they would kind of bring bands along, an album or two, and see if they could pull their weight, whatever. But these days. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just so disappointed in a lot of music these days. It's just so homogenized.
It's so true. I mean, I go back. I find myself listening to stuff that I grew up on, from the 70s and the 80s. I mean, they don't make music like they used to, and part of the reason for that is, that's why we're going back to this stuff, because a lot of this stuff is just filler these days, or it just sounds all the same. And I think part of Edgar Winter's success was having a guy like Rick Derringer in the studio with him, because Rick Derringer very much was a musician himself, as opposed to just some guy, behind this producer's chair, or whatever, not knowing nothing about Edgar Winter or his sound.
No, he was a really good musician.
Yeah.
He was a good singer, good guitarist. He also played bass. He also played piano. He's a character, man.
Yeah.
But that's how he surrounded himself. He was such a talent that those kind of people gravitated to him also, to Edgar Winter.
Yeah. Because
he was such a talent.
And here's another bit of trivia. I don't know if you're aware of, Mick, in regards to Edgar Winter, is he actually, if you remember David Lee Roth, when he first left Van Halen in 1985, he put out like a 4-song EP with a bunch of covers. And Edgar Winter plays sax, I think, and some of the horns on David Lee Roth's version of Just a Gigolo.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. And again, it wasn't a big deal back then. It was kind of like, special guest Edgar Winter, but, they didn't make a big deal about it. But it really, Edgar's playing on that really added to the track,
Of course it did.
Yeah.
Of course it did, man. He had such I'm sure that, if you looked at Wikipedia or whatever, I'm sure those string sections and horn sections, I'm sure he had a lot to do with arranging all that stuff, especially the horn sections. Yeah, he's just that guy, so. And
I think that's why even bands like the Rolling Stones later on in their career, because, even talking about the band that you play with, Mick Adams and the Stones, you guys covered the Rolling Stones, and I seen some videos of you guys on stage where, like, at certain times in the Rolling Stones career, they actually had horn players and background singers up on stage, and that really just kind of adds to the live performance,
Oh, always. Sure. When I started doing the Stones thing, every other band was a 5-piece band.
Yeah.
And the Stones bands that were around, there's only a couple of them back then.
Yeah.
We're just playing a lot of really early stuff. And man, how can you leave out things like Exile? And, they keep on going from there forward. You just can't. So I made a point to always have at least one female vocalist and a great keyboard player, even if I didn't have a horn section. Yeah. Because the horns and that female voice adds so much, and it adds more to stage production.
Yeah.
It all comes down to trying to represent that music, to the best of your ability, kind of thing.
Yeah. And
I a lot of people, like it when the Stones are just doing like the 5 of them.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. That's great. And they're really good at it. And they're really good at blues, obviously, since they won a Grammy for that damn blues album. That's hysterical to me. Yeah. But I think it's great.
Yeah,
But they're so Mick's always been about the show.
Yeah. And you know what interests me is like, okay, since Bill Wyman left the band, they've had Daryl Jones in the band, the black guy, and he's actually been in the band longer than Bill Wyman now. But it's kind of funny that he's in the band, but he's not. And I understand they do stuff like that for money reasons and stuff. He's in the band for all these years, but he's not an official member of the band. A lot of times when you see band photos, it's just of the four guys, Ronnie and Charlie and Mick and Keith.
Well, yeah, because they're like, especially the three.
Yeah.
Keith and Mick and Charlie.
Yeah.
But Ronnie's been with them for a long time now too.
And he's still kind of considered the new guy as well.
Interesting like epilogue to that.
Yeah.
From what I understand, I'm not
Yeah.
the authority, but from what I understand, a few years back, Keith wanted to make. It's been quite a few years back now. He wanted to make Daryl a permanent member, kind of sort of situation.
Yeah.
And Mick wouldn't give him the title per se. But from what I understand, he got a hellacious raise.
Oh well. I mean, even as a side gig, I mean, I'm sure you're taking care of the rest of your life. You don't have to worry, So
if you're in that band,
yeah.
Okay, and you're as revered by Keith as he is, okay, because he loves Daryl Jones.
Oh, that's cool.
You got somewhere to live the rest of your life.
Oh, yeah.
They'll be on tour here in the States, and if they're on the East Coast, half the band stays at Keith's estate up in Connecticut.
Oh, wow. And he has
multiple houses on the estate. He'll just tell where the key is.
Yeah. and I do believe Rolling Stones are one band that may literally die up on stage while they're on stage. And I say that because, not only because of their age, but really all these years, the only thing that's really slowed the band down, besides this recent COVID-19, is when Mick had his heart surgery last year. And that that they've kept it going. And I'm interested how much longer they can keep it going. But hey, more power to you guys,
Oh, heck yeah. Well, if you look at them, Aerosmith, there's a few bands out there that have totally redefined age.
Oh, yeah.
Remember way back, there's early interviews we said, well, I don't know if we're going to be doing this next year.
Yeah, it's.
There's those days, Here he is 73 now, whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever.
Still cranking it up.
And he's still having kids, at his age. That's
Jesus Christ, yeah.
Yeah. So
love your love, brother, come on.
Yeah. And so, talk a little bit about the Stones now. How did they get on your radar? How did you first become a Rolling Stones fan? Do you remember what the song was? What was the first album you got?
Well, I remember hearing them.
Yeah.
I think the first album I actually bought, I had a couple singles here and there, but I think my first album, because I put it on there too, was High Tides and Green Grass.
Oh, wow. That's
and I not only loved the album for the music that was on it, but I loved the style.
Yeah.
The wide well chords and the colors and the paisley shirts or whatever, the vest or whatever, all that stuff, the Beatle boots. And, the whole fashion thing that happened too was amazing to me. So
the image itself, how it's evolved over years. A lot of those earlier albums, they almost the haircuts and that were very Beatle-esque, if you will, and then hair got a little longer, and then they just kind of
they kept letting theirs get longer.
Yeah.
The management told them, look, the Beatles are the good guys.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're gonna be the bad boys. Here we go.
There you go. There's nothing wrong with that. And a lot of that early stuff I really love, Beast of Burden, Get Off My Cloud. And the thing about a lot of the classic stuff is, if you listen to the lyrics, it's not necessarily about anything. They're not trying to recreate the world or anything. This is just great rock music. It's good time music. It's fun. And if you listen to a lot of the lyrics, just so simple. It's amazing,
Oh yeah. You were asking about my first Stones song.
Well, was there a song you heard on the radio that really turned you on?
I can't remember how old I was. I was younger. There were some older guys that lived around the corner from me, where I lived up in Monrovia, California.
Yeah.
This little town. And these older guys had started putting a band together. So I went out and I was sitting out on the curb out in front of. They were rehearsing in the guy's garage, and they were working on Heart of Stone. They were trying to learn Heart of Stone.
Oh wow!
And it was sounding pretty good musically.
Yeah.
the guy, whoever was singing, I still don't know who it was to this day. Who was singing, one of the guitar players, I guess, was awful.
Wow.
And even as a kid, I knew he was awful.
Wow.
Well, I've been singing since I was 3 years old, so
okay.
It's like, you know, I mean, my first paying gig was Woolworths, when I was little, had what they called a diner counter.
Okay.
Where you get like shakes and banana splits and all that stuff. My mom knew the girls that worked there, and they'd stand me up on the counter at 3 years old, and I would sing for them. They'd pay me an ice cream.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's just taking you back, huh?
The whole thing is,
yeah.
So that where I was going with the other thing, wherever I was going with it, is just that music is everything.
Yeah.
To me, you know, music's everything to a lot of people. They don't even realize.
Well, even listening to this music all these years, you know, it's become the soundtrack of our lives, if you will. And and it's kind of interesting because the Stones, I mean, there's a period where, you know, right before Steel Wheels came out, where they didn't tour, they didn't talk. They were kind of briefly split up, let's say, for about 3 or 4 years, and then they came back together for Steel Wheels. They've been doing it pretty nonstop ever since. But
ever since, yeah.
You know, and the interesting thing is some of them tried to go off and, you know, even Mick and Keith and do kind of a solo thing, but it's never been as good as when they're together, which I think is a huge reason why they're still together, you know?
It's the magic.
Yeah. I mean, I even in the, I think, early 80s, or like 85 or 86, I think Mick put out a solo album, featured of all people on guitar, Joe Satriani.
Yeah.
And even that wasn't much of a hit, but... kind of interesting, you know. And then, like, they come out with something like Steel Wheels, you know, for your comeback. I mean, that was as good as anything they'd ever done before. If like you'd be really thinking like, okay, the Stones haven't put anything out, you know, it's probably going to be crap. It's probably not going to be as good as it used to be, but it was there, you know. They delivered the goods.
And they continue to.
Yeah.
One of my favorite albums in the more recent years is the Bigger Bang.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's not a bad one either.
I think there's only one kind of off song in the whole album, and it's a long album, but the songs just kick butt. The ballads are great. The rockin' stuff's rocking. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you. So I'm sitting on the curb, and I'm just kind of singing along, and they quit playing, and I was just kind of sitting there singing the song. And one of the guys walks up, taps me on the shoulder. He goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, nothing. I was just a kid." I said, "I'm nothing. I'm just listening." No, he goes, "No, you were singing."
Yeah.
I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Come on in here."
Yeah. Wow.
So I go in, and they go, "Let's just play that song, Mr. Melly. He's going to sing it." And everybody in the band looks at me. And I'm just a kid. These guys are like, you know, I was probably 12.
Yeah. Wow.
So, I don't know, whatever it was. And these guys are like, you know, in high school and whatever.
Yeah.
And so I started playing. I started singing it. And I'll never forget, the one guy looked at the rest of the band and goes, "I think that's how it's supposed to go."
And let me guess the next part of the story. They told the other guy that was singing, "You're fired. He's hired."
No, that happened later. I really did. I was kind of shy.
Yeah.
And so I started playing drums. My grandpa was a big band drummer.
Oh, wow.
So I had a natural sense of rhythm kind of thing going on. And so I started out as a drummer. I'll never forget, we were playing in this guy's house. We were learning songs so we could go play like at the high school kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And we were learning "Live for the Day" by the Bull Brummels.
Oh, wow.
And it's got that part. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, the singer in the band, he get to that part and he couldn't get it. So I had to open my big mouth and say, "Well, I think I could do that part. If you sing the rest of the song." Mm-hmm. Really? Let's see it. So we get to that part and I do it. The guitar player looks at the singer and goes, "You're fired." He goes, "You're fired." He looks at me and goes, "You're fired." I go, "What?" He goes, "No, now you're the singer, and I got to get a new drummer."
Oh, wow. You know, and it's kind of interesting because a lot of guys that would go on to become famous singers, like Steven Tyler of Aerosmith, Janie Lane from Warrant, they started out as drummers, and then, you know, then they get in the front of the stage and they do their thing. It's kind of interesting, you know.
I have a really good friend, tribute buddy. Gregory Fensley. He's in a band called Queen Nation.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've heard of him. Yeah.
He's probably the best Freddie Mercury around, and he's a great drummer. In fact, before they go on stage, he tunes their drummer's kit.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's cool. In fact, if you don't mind me getting into a little of your history, Mick, for a minute, as you know, I interviewed your drummer Vince yesterday, and he gave a great interview, and he was talking a little bit about the formation of Mick Adams and the Stones, and he was sharing with me that that you were not the original singer, and I was kind of getting a crack at this because I thought, oh wait a minute, the band is called Mick Adams and the Stones, and so naturally, naturally you assume, okay, Mick started the band, and he said, no, actually there are two other singers, and they were nowhere near as good as Mick. He said, but when Mick got into the band, we were kind of talking about this. He said he was just that good, because I was telling him, I thought it was Mick's band because it's Mick. He goes, no, he was that good, and so we had no problem with calling it Mick Adams and the Stones because he's a big part of what we do, and after the previous two singers that really were not working out, personality wise and whatever, he said this guy really he made the band,
That's very nice of him. I'll tell you what, we've been together now for, Jesus God almighty.
I think he said 11 years or something like that.
Yeah, 11, 12 years almost, yeah.
And are you surprised at how people have taken it? Because see, like what I shared with Vince yesterday, a lot of people they're under the misconception that the guys that play in tribute bands or musicians playing tribute, they're failed musicians, they're playing other people's music. But like I told Vince yesterday, to me, you're talking to a guy here who doesn't play musical licks. So first of all, to get up, be able to play anybody's music, that takes a huge talent right there. But I call what you guys do, I call it rock and roll theater, because you don't just get up in your jeans and t-shirt. People come and see your band, they'll swear they're looking at Mick Jagger and Charlie Watts, and Ron Wood and all. I mean, you look. If anybody goes on your Facebook page, you look the part of Mick Jagger. I mean, you kind of even sound like him. When you're singing in that, and Vince was sharing a couple stories with me that when you guys have played some of these bigger casinos, people have actually mistaken you for a Rolling Stones. They're like, no, come on, you're Mick and you're Charlie, and okay.
It's gotten so funny. We just play it off now. Oh yeah.
Yeah. But it's hilarious because that's what it is. It's rock and roll theater. And what people fail to realize is, I will say that you were one of the premier Rolling Stone tribute out here in LA. And I say that because a lot of times when I go on Facebook, I really only come across you guys and maybe the Hollywood Stones as far as Stone tributes out here. And it's kind of interesting because as popular as the Rolling Stones are, you'd think there'd be more tributes. But I'm kind of thinking that if you're going to do the Stones, you better be good at it,
Yeah, there's other ones around. There's probably 5 within a 40-mile radius of where I live. But,
oh, wow.
It's just, I just managed to, especially with the help of my wife. My wife's brilliant at business. Oh my God. I'm just that guy that wants to play music and dance and have fun and play harmonica or whatever and do what I do. And I get real frustrated with the business end of it.
And it is.
I shouldn't even dabble in it. I can be good at it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if somebody really puts me off, then my Irish temper comes out and I make a fool of myself. So, but my wife, who is even more Irish than I am, her maiden name was O'Brien.
Wow.
Okay, she could just bottle that up and go, "Oh God, thank you so much." And no. How do you do that?
So you got.
I'm going to tell them to piss off, mate. You know.
So you got the Irishman playing the Englishman.
Yeah, basically, yeah. I do. That's exactly what it is.
Wow! But you really are good at it. And I was kind of curious. Before you hooked up with the current band, did you give it a shot doing the original music thing, like a lot of people?
Oh yeah, I was in a band called Yankee Rose out on the Sunset Strip back in the day.
Oh wow! Any reference to David Lee Roth?
I played with all the guys from Quiet Riot.
Oh wow!
You name it, we played together out there. I mean, holy crap, all of us.
Wow!
And I'm still friends with Chuck. I talk to Chuck all the time.
Oh wow! Yeah, he's been with them. If you ever seen that Quiet Riot movie, there's a part where
I saw it. It's really good.
There's a part where he's in it, and it's like he's really pissed because a lot of people, because Rudy Sarzo's on the back cover, they don't realize, except for one song maybe that Chuck played on the rest of the album, and he's like, no, I'm the guy that played the bass. It's just his picture. No,
yeah.
we don't want your autograph. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, I know Rudy, and I knew so many of the people that played out on the Strip back in the day. What's his name that was with Ozzy for a while, got killed? Oh my God.
Oh, Randy Rose, yeah.
Randy Rose. And you know what's really funny is, Randy Rose was like one of the nicest guys in the world. Yeah. Oh my God, he was such a sweetheart.
Yeah, in fact, I mean, in fact, I've heard in interviews the other guys talk about when Randy was in the band so much that one of the guys actually wanted to, back in the day, fire Kevin DuBrow from the band, and Randy was like, no, he's my friend. We're not firing him.
I've heard those stories.
Yeah. But it's funny. But see, my point I'm making is a lot of, because it is hard to do the original music thing. But what I found in interviewing many of the tribute guys is like, for instance, I've interviewed Swan Montgomery, this lead singer from Led Zeppelin, huge Zeppelin tribute out here, and he's really good at what he does. And amazingly, like you, he's not the original singer in the band, but he was telling me, I've actually been fronting the band for 30 years. We recently celebrated 30 years together. So just think about that for a minute. 30 years in a tribute band. So they've had some kind of level of success. And he was also sharing with me, when they did the reunion show back in London, and they released that Celebration Day CD and DVD, he says Jimmy and I guess Plant were aware of Led Zeppelin so much that they got a special invite from the band. They flew them over to that show in London that they played with Jason Bonham, and they were the special guests backstage. I mean, just think of experience something like that because you're playing in a tribute band, to this band you grew up on. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah, it's really pretty phenomenal, man. It really is.
And then, he was also sharing with me that, Led Zeppelin, that's kind of my main gig. That pays, and that helps pay the bills. But then from time to time, because Led Zeppelin has kind of become so huge, it allows him from time to time, if he wants to put out a solo album or something, that he can do that, and he keeps it separate. But the Led Zeppelin fans kind of support what he does. And I think that's a really cool part about, the tribute scene.
Yeah, a lot of people, they see me in a tribute band, and, they don't know all the things I've done in the past.
Yeah,
it's like, if they had a clue, they'd go, what the hell?
Now, I was curious.
If you go to our website and you look at my biography, I mean, it's like crazy. I've performed on stages and actually hung out and been with so many rock stars through the years. Everybody from America to Tommy James and the Shondells, the Turtles, to Ron Dante, who did Sugar Sugar and that stuff. And, God.
If you could name
Felix from the Rascals. The Turtles. I know. I've been on stage and played with all these guys. Peter Noon.
Oh wow. Yeah. Oh wow. The Rascals. That takes me back. But
I love the Rascals. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Now, I was curious with the invent of the internet. Have you ever thought, not necessarily? I mean, you could do both, I guess, sell it if you wanted, but put some of that older stuff, even some of your older demos or just original music, out there on the internet for the fans to check out. Or have you ever thought of putting out a CD of that stuff just for people to check out?
Yeah, I've thought about it. It's really weird. There was a guy that contacted me quite a while back now. He wanted to. I actually still have a Yankee Rose album.
Oh wow!
In the plastic.
And
he wanted to buy it, and then he never got back to me. But you go online, and Yankee Rose for that era was in the top 100 or something of bands to watch or something like that. Yeah. The band I was in, we got written up in Billboard magazine.
Amazing, see?
We did a lot of shit back in the day, so.
And Yankee Rose,
there's a solo artist at one point.
Wow. And Yankee Rose, was that any reference to the David Lee Roth song, or?
No, he stole the name from us because we were around before he ever did that song.
Oh wow! See, that's a story I'd love to hear.
In fact, we all hung out together. Well, it was easy to hang out with Eddie back in the day, and Michael, especially. Michael Anthony's a sweetheart of a guy too. He's a great guy. Yeah. And it was easy to hang out with those guys. David was always tripping on his own ego.
Yeah.
And then Alex was always more broody, kind of quiet to himself. Michael Anthony's a great guy, and back in the day, Eddie was really cool too.
Yeah. So it's kind of sad to see the way they treat Michael Anthony these days, but I think that
it's pathetic.
I think that has more to do with alcohol and stuff. Who knows though? Whatever else he did.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I remember when they were called Red Ball Jets. Come on.
Oh yeah. Oh wow, you go back with them that long. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I worked at London Bridges in Pasadena with David Lee Roth.
Oh wow, wow. And it's kind of amazing. Even when Roth went back this last time, they did one studio album. It was kind of like old stuff that they had written, and they just kind of went in there and demoed it or whatever. it wasn't
Sure.
the big comeback album like we were expecting. And then Eddie got sick with the cancer, and they really haven't done much since. So, if that's all they ever did, I guess they made their mark.
Well, yeah, they're in the history books. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. And so
I don't know. I liked him with David.
Yeah.
David was a great frontman.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Even though he borrowed most of that stuff from what's that guy's name? Wasn't that crazy?
Oh, I know who you're talking about. The Jim Bean or something like that.
Jim Dandy.
Jim Dandy, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, he borrowed a lot of stuff from Jim Dandy, but that's okay. But he still was a great frontman.
Yeah.
But I like both versions. I like the Sammy version too because Sammy's a really good writer, and he and Eddie together put together some great freaking songs.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. But they're almost two different. They're almost two different bands in that.
Yeah.
The Roth stuff is just real classic rock type of stuff, and Sammy too. But Sammy's much more of a songwriter than Roth. I mean, Roth, the way he writes to me is kind of interesting because a lot of the words don't even. It's nonsensical, but it just kind of fits for him, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it just kind of goes with the flow. Yeah.
A lot of words don't even mean anything, but like, okay, that kind of it fits the song or whatever. But and then
when you're in a band like Sammy went into that band, and you're in that band. And between you guys, you write a song that Pepsi picks up.
Oh, yeah.
Right now. I mean, come on, Jesus Christ.
And that was all over MTV. And people talk about the Sammy stuff. Oh, that's when Eddie got more into keyboards. But whatever, man. It was all good. And
it's all good.
And I think the interesting thing with the Van Halen 3 record we did with Gary Cherone, it wasn't that it was a bad, like, I love the single they released that it was called Without You, and it's that of all the stuff that's out, maybe most Van Halen like. And Gary Cherone was interesting in that he's a very good singer in his own right, but he's a great singer, yeah. He has a couple things going against him in that when people hear Gary Cherone, they think of Extreme and they think of the one song, more than words. Which if you're an Extreme fan at all, there's, they were not really a one-hit wonder, as you say, but that's what people think.
My favorite song on that album of theirs is "If You Don't Like What You See Here, Get the Funk Out."
Oh yeah, it's just a little play on the words. And then there's another song, "Decadent Dance." I love that. It's all good. But and then the other thing is, as far as being in Van Halen, I thought Gary Cherone he had the ability to sound like both Roth and Hagar.
Yeah, he's a good singer, really good singer.
And it's just a shame that he only got the one album, but it is what it is. So I got to ask you, Mick, before we wrap this up, the COVID-19 lockdown, how much, how much has that been affecting? Obviously, you guys aren't able to do the live show, so have you given any thought to, not maybe when you're going to get back on the stage, but maybe doing like some of these bands, they've been doing like live performances, from their backyard and stuff like that?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about getting in touch with my buddy David Brighton.
Oh, wow.
He does the best David Bowie around. And ask him when he's going to do another one. Ask him if he could do Dancing in the Streets. I show up at his house and we do it together like Mick and David.
Now that's a cool idea. Have you ever done that on stage, or is that something that just kind of popped into you?
Oh, we've done that dozens of times together.
Yeah, because one of the coolest tribute shows I ever been to, one of the guys, fortunately, has passed on, but Kenny Metcalf, who does Elton, a number of years ago, he did they were doing an Elton and Billy Joel, like a Piano Man kind of tribute. And one guy, they'd get up on stage playing the piano. They play obviously Elton songs and Billy Joel songs. And I forget the guy's name, but he passed away. But they actually had it on Access TV. And man, it was the most dynamite thing I'd ever seen. That's the thing about doing these tribute shows. If you can do something kind of unique or special to recreate a moment in time, like what you're talking, even with David Bowie, a guy who plays David Bowie, and you guys, that was one of my all-time favorite tracks. But it's one of those tracks that people have kind of forgotten about.
Well, David and I do that any chance we get.
That would be so.
He's probably he's probably one of my closest friends and longest friends that I've had in this tribute world.
Oh, wow.
This crazy world I live in.
Yeah, and I would think there would be there's probably a huge demand for what he does already, but especially since Bowie is,
oh my God,
passed
dude.
on.
This is a true story.
Yeah.
So I get up one morning and I get on the computer, and this is after David Bowie died, and David was all over Europe. I mean, he was in every country you could possibly imagine doing shows after Bowie passed. And so there's a little message on my Facebook page that goes, all it says is, "Where am I?"
Wow.
It's from David.
Yeah.
And so I got back to him. I said, I don't know. Look out the window. He goes, I tried that. He goes, all the buildings look the same around here. Old.
Oh, wow.
And I go, well, I'll bet if you ask Switch, he knows where you're at. He goes, oh, yeah. I go, how you doing, buddy? He goes, man, I'm beat. He goes, I've been in 6 countries and 14 cities in the last few weeks or something like that. And I went, holy shit.
Oh, good luck to you, buddy. Yeah, that's...
I go, that's crazy, man. He was making bank like crazy. You can't even imagine.
Oh, yeah.
But he was so tired. And so finally, the next day, he goes, I was in Poland.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
I go, okay, now you know where you're heading anyway, whatever. So,
yeah.
Oh, my God, it was funny.
And
my God.
I'll tell you another interesting thing about, David Bowie. A couple years, maybe about a year ago now, Alice Cooper put together this kind of all-star tribute band. And one of the guys, called Hollywood Vampires, oddly enough, and one of the guys in the band is actually actor Johnny Depp, who's one of the guitar players. And if you get the album, I'm sure you can go on YouTube and hear it. It's called. They do a great cover of the Bowie classic "Heroes" with Johnny Depp singing lead vocal.
Oh, I have to hear that.
And it's just amazing. And I mean, I never heard anything like that. I mean, he's a great singer. I guess, like he was saying. Yeah, I'm an actor, for my day job. This is kind of just what I do on the side. But man, he really pulls it off as far as covering David Bowie.
Oh yeah, it's really funny when he first came to Hollywood before he got into doing TV shows and all that crap.
Yeah.
That's what he came out here for, was to be a rock star.
Did a little later in life, but hey, no better a person to be up on stage with than the legendary Alice,
Yeah, but he one of his best friends in the whole world is Keith Richards.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Well, because I forgot they did the movie together. Pirates or whatever it was.
Pirates.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but they're such good friends. This is a true story. If Keith Richards sees a really great pair of boots he wants to buy,
Calls Johnny Depp.
he buys them, and then he has them delivered to Johnny.
Oh wow.
And Johnny will wear them for like 6 months and break them in for him, and then send them back.
Oh wow. That's...
They're crazy good friends. Oh my God.
Oh, that's cool. Wow. You have a lot of great...
When he did Pirates,
yeah.
Johnny called Keith up and he said, "Do you mind if I model my character after you in your more flamboyant times?" And he laughed and said, hell no.
Yeah.
So,
Wow, that's amazing. So I guess you guys will be. Hopefully, you can pull that off. I'd love to see if you can get him to do something with you.
Sure.
That would be great. Wow. So you just kind of waiting to be able to get back up on stage, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Huh?
And another thing. Not only am I still doing my own band, right? Have you ever heard of Windborne Music?
No, I haven't. Tell us about that.
Okay, I just became the Mick Jagger for them also.
Oh, wow.
And what that is this guy sends out different bands to different parts of the country to do different people's music. So there might be Queen one night over here, and over here the next night might be a Zeppelin tribute, whatever kind of thing. But what it is I'm doing all the Mick Jagger stuff for him now, and it's myself and a 5 or 6 piece kick-ass band. And we go out to performing arts centers and do shows with 40 to 60 piece orchestras.
Is there like a website for this where people could check it out?
Yeah, Windborne Music, or yeah, I think that's it.
Okay.
Let me find out from Aaron for sure.
Okay, yeah. If you could, when you get a chance, kind of email me.
What's the Windborne? Is it Windborne Music or Windborne Music? The music of Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Rolling Stones. That's what it's under. The stuff I'm doing.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll have to check that out. Well, that's a cool gig to begin doing a little something different. Well,
oh yeah, and not only that, the money's obscene.
Oh, that'd be cool. Hey Mick, thanks so much for taking time talking to me. It's been fun catching up with you. And I'll have this up maybe in a week or two. I'll let you know when it gets posted. At that point in time, you're more than welcome to put it on your sites or let all your friends know about it, whatever you want to do. But thanks for doing this today.
It's been fun talking to you about all the music stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Not just the Edgar Winter stuff that you called about initially, but just all of it. It's just always good to do that stuff.
Hey,